My name is Gabe Botero, and I'm a recent MSW graduate of the UConn School of Social Work. I'm here today to talk to you about my experience as a student learning about and visiting the island of Vieques. I first learned about Vieques while taking a Puerto Rican and Latino studies class in the fall of 2013. I was shocked and appalled by the videos played in the class and the discussions about the previous military occupation of the island, and also the negative treatment of local advocates and protesters by the U.S. government. I did not understand why the government had chosen to destroy one of the United States and the world's most natural beauties. I did not understand why the government was against the people of Vieques. Most importantly, as a military veteran, I did not understand how the military could just pick up and leave everything behind, including ordnance, equipment, and other material. Not once in my 6-year military career did we leave anything behind, and not once did we not clean up after ourselves. So this made no sense to me. This brief video will discuss my journey to the island of Vieques, where my experiences helped me become a better social worker and helped me further understand the concept of health as a human right and the need for better health conditions in Vieques. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights defines human rights as rights inherent to all human beings without distinction of nationality, place of residence, sex, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, language, or any other condition. Furthermore, Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights establishes that every person has the right to a standard of living which assures adequate health and well-being that includes food, clothing, housing, healthcare, and security in situations of illness or disability. The International Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights and National Initiative on Economic and Social Rights have expanded the concept of health as a human right and have introduced the concept that every human being has the right to enjoy the highest standards of health, including prevention, treatment, and control of epidemic diseases, and the right of every person to enjoy the benefits and the application of scientific progress. This scientific process includes access to medical services, health, adequate food, proper housing, healthy working conditions, and an environment free of contamination. As social workers, it is in our code of ethics and in national standards that we must commit to promote overall general wellness, social justice, the prevention and elimination of discrimination, and access to resources and services required by all human beings. In the months leading up to my class trip to Puerto Rico and the island of Vieques, I conducted a lot of research on the history of Vieques and the efforts to clean up the island. I found a lot of reports showing concerns from residents about the Navy's method of blowing up unexploded ordnance in place without the use of contaminant chambers. This means that any ordnance that is exploded goes into the air. What happens to the hazardous material and the residue that goes into the air? How does this material affect the people? What are the health implications of this quote-unquote cleanup action? Is this not a violation of human rights? Is this not a prevention of allowing the people to enjoy the highest standard of health? Looking for answers, I found more questions. A Navy report showed that local boaters, fishermen, regularly trespass into dangerous areas where there is still unexploded ordnance and children play and dig on contaminated beaches. The Navy says they have warned residents to stay away, but since they are not in control of the land, they cannot enforce this. Again, a violation of human rights. Here, we see fishermen pursuing the right to have access to food, which affects their direct health. Children playing on the beaches, that's physical fitness, which again is another factor of health. Can we really blame the locals for trying to improve their lives? Is it not our call as social workers to ensure that social justice is met for these people so that they can pursue their given human rights without restriction? Conducting research is great and an important part of social work, but you don't get the full experience of a situation until you are fully immersed and can live that experience. The Vieques I pictured in my head for my research was not the Vieques I came to experience and fall in love with. The beautiful beaches, the palm trees, the wildlife including wild horses roaming the island, the warm vibe of the people, the Spanish influence on the buildings, Fort Conde de Marisol. At first glance, it seemed like nothing was wrong on the island. Of course, there is always more than meets the eye, and more to a problem than just what you see on the surface. There are three issues that I want to focus on during my trip in relation to health. The first being food disparity. I didn't realize it at first, but Vieques is just another food desert. Much like my current hometown of Hartford, Connecticut, there is very limited access to food in Vieques. Along with the other students, I was shocked to learn that there was only one supermarket for the entire island. Split up into teams for a cooking competition, you can only imagine how much more that shock grew as we struggled to find the common items we were looking for. Looking back at the supermarket, I thought about the struggle of the people to all have to come to that one supermarket and get everything. Everything that they're looking for. It's so easy for us at home to go to different supermarkets. Yeah, Hartford only has one supermarket, but I can go to surrounding towns that have multiple supermarkets. I can go and look for the best price. In fact, if all else fails, I can just go to Walmart, and they usually have a low-cost option. But the people in Vieques don't have this choice. They have to make do with the products in that store, in that supermarket. Even if the price is high, and even if the supermarket doesn't have the items they're looking for, that's the only choice they have. They have to make do. Food continued to be an issue during our limited time in Vieques. The availability of low-cost dining options is definitely a problem on the island. In our time there, we were only able to find one low-cost sandwich shop. The other places we found were extremely expensive, overpriced for the local Viequense, and really catered towards tourists and island visitors. I understand that tourism is a way of life for the island, but how can the local people survive if they do not have cheap access to food? How can they care for themselves and their families and stay healthy? If they cannot take care of themselves, how can they work in the tourism jobs that they hold? And how can they help sustain the important tourism income stream? The second major factor that influences health is a lack of infrastructure. Sure, the island has a small airport, but this is mainly for tourism purposes and does not serve a direct purpose for the people. What I'm talking about is hospitals, banks, civil service buildings. The only things I saw during the trip was a small rundown outpatient clinic, which looked in pretty bad shape and we're told provides limited services, and a small, also rundown and pretty bad shape post office. The most vital of these deficiencies was the lack of a major hospital. A major hospital is the vital link and lifeline to ensuring that the prevention, treatment, and control of epidemic diseases is met. This should be even more vital and essential in an area where the U.S. government has bombed and contaminated both the land and the people. Studies show that the Viequenses of the same age groups as those on the mainland have much higher rates of cancer and respiratory diseases. This cannot be a coincidence. The third major factor, which has been briefly touched upon, is that of the contamination on the island. We took a tour of the old Naval Storage Ammunition Depot. I was shocked to see the old bunkers left completely intact, communications equipment like satellite dishes and antenna, chairs, books, and other things just littering the sites. I mean, it was crazy. Everything was just thrown everywhere. There was no rhyme or reason to it. It's like the military left and didn't clean anything up. Having served in today's military, where the focus is on winning hearts and minds, meaning limiting civilian casualties, damage to civilian property, and cleaning up after yourself, I just couldn't believe where we were. To me, it seemed like an alternate universe. It was difficult for me to comprehend that this was caused by the U.S. military. One important factor to note is that our tour was a windshield tour, meaning we never left our vehicles. While we did not get an explanation, I can only imagine that the tour guides were afraid of any potential problems we might encounter by exploring an old military site. What if a tourist was hurt or killed as a result of an unexploded ordnance or other abandoned equipment? This would impact the individual's health, but also that of the tour guides and other people on the tour. I also thought about the vast amount of the island that remained unexplored and that we were not allowed to access. This land was officially designated as a nature preserve, but I can only imagine how much of that preserve is actually contaminated areas filled with ordnance, weapons in the water and on the beaches, and signs of a military occupation long forgotten. In comparison to the size and power of the United States, Vieques was the little mouse that roared and was victorious. After years of occupation, the U.S. Navy left the island and ceased all military activity. Today, 12 years after the fact, Vieques is now a forgotten island. In fact, If not for a small group of Puerto Rican professors at the UConn School of Social Work, I wonder if I would have ever learned about Vieques or had the opportunity to visit the island. Many visitors come to the island for tourist purposes without realizing the history of that land, the struggle to end military occupation, and the continued fight for social justice. While those in the States don't remember this violent history, the people on the island have never forgotten. At one point, I clashed with well-known Vieques leaders because they automatically associated their pain, suffering, distrust, and dislike of the military with me. Never mind that I had served years later in a different military, in a different conflict, under different ethics and values, and had come to Vieques to learn and to try to find ways to help them. None of these things mattered. To them, the wounds of the past were still very fresh in their minds. This was a difficult experience for me. Never before had I been challenged for my military service, and never did I ever question what I had done or why I had served. But I really did think about it this time. But it wasn't until I got home that I was able to really reflect on that experience and understand the value of empathy, understand the value of putting myself in their shoes, and understanding where their pain and suffering comes from, and understanding why they felt the way they did. Today I am glad that I had that experience, because I feel that it has made me a better social worker and has prepared me to deal with similar issues in the future. The truth is about Vieques, while the military is no longer there, the occupation continues. The threat of contamination and unexploded ordnance is very real and has a direct impact on the health of the Vieques people, but also on their human rights, on social justice, on the ability for these people to heal from the wounds of war and move on with their lives and secure a better future. Vieques is forgotten, but it must not be. As social workers, we have the power to change that, to bring about change, to advocate for the island, to educate our congressional leaders and community activists, to hold the U.S. government accountable for the mismanagement and years of failure in helping to clean up and to decontaminate the island. We must continue this work. We must continue to go to Vieques to educate future generations of students and let the world know what has happened, what has changed, and what hasn't changed, and what still needs to be done. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter. It is clear that Vieques still needs a lot of help, and there is still a lot of work to be done. Health is a human condition, but it's also a human right. Everyone should have access to health care, and everyone should have the opportunity to live a free and healthy life where they don't have to worry about contaminants, pollutants, and other things that are in the environment thanks to a military occupation that really destroyed the land and damaged the people. The government has made a lot of promises, but these promises have not been met, and change needs to happen. How does this change happen? Well, one of the first things is to have advocates get involved. And I don't mean the advocates that live in Vieques and are there every day working hard on this issue. I'm talking about social work students, particularly myself and the others that were part of a trip to Vieques this summer, and that go every other summer. Why is this important? Well, it really is a blessing and an opportunity to be able to go and visit the island and experience its beauty, but also learn about the conditions and learn about what's going on. And it's a wealth of knowledge that you bring back to the States. And really, this wealth of knowledge can make a difference. By coming back and sharing our experiences with others and talking about the conditions and advocating for the island, we can hopefully enact some positive change. Earlier this year, I organized a meeting with U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal to discuss some of the problems on the island and some of the issues. A lot of state leaders and community leaders in the Puerto Rican community, as well as professors from the UConn School of Social Work who have worked on this issue for many years, attended this meeting. No discussions were had. Discussions that talked about the future and accountability and meeting the promises that the U.S. government has made. This is the kind of advocacy that needs to continue. This is the kind of advocacy that can happen thanks to this trip of social work students to Puerto Rico. This is the kind of advocacy that will continue and will bring change to the island of Vieques.